Welcome to the Self-Care Creative Podcast, a show where I talk about the struggles, mental health, and work-life balance of creatives. I'm your host, Ray, and I hope you will follow me through a journey of figuring out a better life as a creative through deep dives into self-care topics and interviews with other creatives about their ups and downs. Mental health is kind of the topic of our time. Really doesn't matter if you're a student, working an average job, if you're an entrepreneur, this topic crosses your path regularly, unless you push it away, but then you wouldn't listen to this podcast, right? Creative people like you and me usually tend to be drawn into mental illness a little bit easier than others, and I think that's because we act way more with emotions than with rationality, because that's how we get our inspiration and that's how we just work as creative people. And that can lead very easily to negative thought spirals, to thinking up worst case scenarios, to amping up stress hormones because we want to be productive in what we're doing. And on top of that, we're just in a system that kind of pushes mental illness very easily, because the power structures and how the economy currently works is just very much playing into that. So how can you stay mentally healthy as a creator, as a creative? Healthy habits, coping mechanisms, and a little bit of escapism sprinkled in. And if you put that under an umbrella term, that is probably called self-care. Like, all of these things are self-care. Healthy habits, coping mechanisms, and escaping from time to time is all considered self-care. I think when you're open-minded, that also means every day is a little different for you, so habits and especially routines can help a lot with not falling off track with your mental health. And yes, by that I mean morning and evening routines. Yes, those are not just for YouTubers, especially beauty YouTubers. Those routines can actually help a lot. We don't just need to go outside of our comfort zone as a creative person, we also need something to have as a foundation, as like a place to come back to, and routines are kind of that thing for a lot of people, because they help stabilize your mood, they help you feel safe, they help you ground yourself. It's a coping mechanism in itself. My favorite book on this is Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod. I think that's how you say his name. I'll link that in the blog post to this episode that is linked in the show notes. The Miracle Morning routine has 6 habits in it: meditation, affirmation, visualization, exercise, reading, and journaling. I tweaked mine a little bit and combined meditation, affirmation, and visualization into a specific kind of meditation that I do. So I can personally boil it down to 4 habits. And those 4 habits are meditation, exercise, reading, and journaling. Those also happen to be the 4 most common coping mechanisms that you will come across in therapy. Okay, maybe not reading, but meditation, exercise, and journaling, that's like the golden standard for what you need to do on top of therapy for the therapy to work. I'm gonna be honest here, because this podcast also talks a lot about imperfection and struggles, and I don't want to show myself to be like perfect with these things. I personally struggle keeping up with making my routines work, building routines, sticking to routines. That's not easy for me. If it's not easy for you, you're not alone. I've done this routine on and off for years now, and sometimes it's easy to do, sometimes it's hard to do. I wake up, I air my room, I meditate, I try to do at least a little bit of exercise. I mean, in the beginning, when you start this routine, maybe you don't want to do a full workout. I read an article, usually I'm a little bit too lazy to pick up a book, and then I write down some of my feelings. And everyone does that a little bit different, but those habits can have a substantial part in changing your life a little bit. I also think these habits do a lot when you have depression or anxiety. I mean, I have struggled with anxiety for 7 years, and those habits help me a lot staying sane during the really bad times. Like, it's my automatic default to go back to. If I didn't do that morning routine in a while and I noticed that I'm anxious recently, then I'm pushing myself to do it more. I also think it stabilizes depression a little bit. I mean, it really depends what kind of depression you have and how intense it is, but for me, doing a morning routine a couple days in a row improves my mood a lot. I might still not be able to get a lot of stuff done, but at least I'm not like in a negative thought spiral all day because I did the morning routine, if that makes sense. So what do I do exactly? Well, I already made the short form a little bit, but let me dive in a little bit deeper. First, I obviously wake up. I'm trying to wake up at a reasonable hour, which can be hard if you have depression. I'm right there with all of you suffering from depression. It can be super hard to just get out of bed, but that's like the ultimate thing. Sitting down, opening up the curtains, letting in fresh air, and then just sitting on my bed and meditating. That already makes such a big difference. I mean, for me personally, I usually just sit there and breathe, or I sit there with calming music and breathe. But if you need a guided meditation, or if a different grounding technique works better for you, do that. I mean, I don't want to tell you this is like the only way to go. The type of meditation that I do, like I mentioned earlier, I combined visualization and affirmation into that too. So like while I'm meditating, I'm kind of also repeating like affirmations to myself. Visualize better days when I'm having a bad day, or even bigger goals if I'm already having a good day. That helps a lot with telling your brain to like get motivated and inspired for some reason. I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but for me that does a lot. And I think that could help other creatives a lot, because I think you also train your brain to associate meditation with creativity and inspiration and motivation. So every time you meditate, you kind of automatically get that feeling after a while. This also helps a lot with cultivating self-acceptance, self-love, because affirmations kind of do that too. And it helps a lot with figuring out your inner thought process. The more you meditate, the more aware you become of your own thoughts, and you realize that there's like repeated patterns that you need to work on. Like, the more you do this, the more you realize what kind of person you are deep inside in your brain, and you will hear your inner critic, and that will be maybe a little bit hard in the beginning, but the more you know yourself, the better you can work on yourself. You get me? This is also a skill, like listening to yourself, and being able to listen to yourself is a skill that a lot of people that are mentally ill kind of lose in their thought spirals a lot. Like, I know that when I'm having a bad day with depression, it's super hard to like figure out what is even going on in your mind. So the more you train yourself by meditating, by grounding yourself with different techniques, the better you can like cope and understand what's going on up there, even on hard days. After the whole meditation is done, which can, I mean, some days I'm like, I can only do 5 minutes because I just can't concentrate on breathing. That's also okay if you can't meditate for a long time in the beginning. That is hard sometimes. I also have days where I wake up and I'm like, no, I have too much adrenaline already in me to meditate for a long time. A little bit is better than nothing. But yeah, some days it's 20 minutes, some days it's 8, sometimes I even just do 2 minutes. A little bit is better than nothing. Everything helps. After that is done, I try to do exercise. Usually, I don't do a full workout because little steps. I mean, when I'm really deep into doing the routine regularly, I'm usually doing at least a little workout. But if you want to get into this routine, you might not want to go full on 100 doing all of the stuff, because it might be hard to keep up with. So sometimes I just do a few squats, sometimes I just stretch, sometimes like I do little things to just wake up my body that already help getting my blood pumping. Like, just a little bit is better than nothing. I know a lot of people that do yoga in the morning. that helps a lot too. That's even better. You can kind of combine the meditation and exercise by doing yoga if you want to make your morning routine even shorter. I mean, it works. I don't do it, but it works. Other days, I just go outside for a walk. I mean, usually I eat something before that, but yeah, I like going for walks in the morning. But that's honestly just a thing I do on days that I have a little bit of more energy to actually like get ready and get my ass out of the door. Um, well, yeah, that's also a form of exercise. Just going for a walk. It doesn't have to be a long walk, but that also does something with your mood. That is something you will also hear any therapist say, like, go outside more. It's super important. It does stuff to your brain. I can't explain it. I hope I someday have someone on this podcast that I can talk about this with. But being in nature or just going for walks does something calming to your brain, and it trains it trains something in your brain. I forgot what it was exactly, and it bothers me. But yeah, it's good for your brain actually. Like that was like there's a study around that, I think. Oh, also, especially if you already deal with mental illness, walks are pretty much the most essential thing that you can do if you're already like a self-isolating kind of person like I am when I'm like down. Depression needs walks, good walks. That's the best start to get out of depression, honestly. Like if you're really really far down currently and listening to this podcast, go for walks, please. And like give yourself little rewards. Like even the walk itself can be a reward. Like, oh yeah, I'm going for a picnic somewhere. That can be a reward in itself. But you know, I will have an entire episode about how to deal with depression when you're like really really low and you can't do a lot. That's on my plan for the future, don't you worry. Now the next thing would be the reading part. For me, when I'm really like into doing this routine regularly, I'm reading a couple pages in a self-help book because I love self-help books. Like, okay, some of them are really not that good and they are rated very well and I don't understand why, but there are very good ones. Like I'm currently reading The Power of Now, and while I don't agree with all of the stuff that's said in that book, it's a very interesting viewpoint to read about. And yeah, I pick up a book and I read like a couple pages. I mean, there are books that are better for that and there are books that are worse for that. I mean, sometimes chapters are way too long to just do that for a short while in the morning. Like, usually I read like a chapter. And when a chapter is like 10 pages long, that takes a little bit more time. And then there are books like The Power of Now, for example, and those are like really... I mean, it has chapters, but it's like the paragraphs have like a different kind of way they're sorted. That's easier to read. Like finding books that have like more places that you can pause reading in really helps if you need to get back into reading, and if you need to incorporate it into your morning routine to calm down and ground yourself. What also helps is reading articles on stuff that you're interested in. That can be mental health, that can be self-help in general. Maybe try to not make the articles you read about work-related stuff. But like, I mean, if you're into science, maybe you read an article on science stuff. I mean, I always like reading about astronomy, astrophysics. I mean, I'm not good at physics, but I love reading about it for some reason. If someone explains it well, really interesting. If y'all like anything space related, read more articles on it. The stuff that I know about space, just because I watch YouTube videos and read articles, I could talk about this for an entire hour, but this is not the podcast for it. Another thing that could help is reading your old journals, if you have old journals, or reading, I mean, if you're in a religion, reading the script for that religion can maybe help you, or, you know, just tiny things. If you're not into reading a lot, I also like poetry, even though it's really hard to find good poetry these days, because I feel like everyone does poetry these days. I mean, it's a subjective thing, but like, you know what I mean. If there's good poetry, maybe read that in the mornings. All of that can help. I mean, it's all about like grounding yourself, calming yourself, as long as it's like not something that agitates you in the morning, you should read it. Try to stay off of social media when it comes to reading. If you find an article on social media, maybe save it to read it the next morning or sometime that week. But scrolling in the morning, I mean, I do it too. We talk about struggles on here. I'm not a good example when it comes to this. I scroll first thing in the morning, and I'm really trying to not do it. But like, you know, we've been through a pandemic, or well, we're kind of still in one. And the first thing you want to do is connect to people, and that kind of only works if you're on your phone nowadays. Whatever. I think you feel me, but try to like keep that a little limited because that interrupts your calmness. You know, that's kind of important when the whole point of the morning routine is to calm you down and ground you. There are also books that are made for morning routines that have like short little mini chapters. I don't know what they are called, but they have like 1-page thingies that you can read every morning. Those are also good. I would love to know what they're like, if they have a name. They have to have a name. I mean, you could even go for like some calendar type of thing that works every day and has like a little saying on it. Reading, something that's reading and grounding you. I talked a lot about this reading part now. Oh yeah, you could also just, read a blog post. That's also counting as an article. My website is linked in the show notes. But last but not least, my favorite habit that I will always talk about, and maybe you will get annoyed by it on this podcast, is journaling. Journaling is so helpful to get to know yourself, to improve yourself, to get your feelings out of your system, everything. Detecting mental health problems while you're having them, before you're having them, like before you start getting like symptoms of them, is only really able, like you aren't really able to find those if you're either journaling or talking to someone about your inner world, to like a therapist or like a person close to you. And journaling is a little bit more readily available to people. So you might want to do that every morning, because wow, the stuff that I found out about myself and my brain just by journaling. Tell me on my social media that's linked in the show notes if you want an episode of me going through my old journal and like explaining stuff to you that I realized while writing that journal. Because there's like one journal from 2016 that opened my mind when I read it back later. I can do that. I love doing that. I personally journal either per hand in a notebook or in Google Documents. You can literally do that anywhere you can write. I mean, make it as easy for yourself as possible. I think my thoughts are too fast most of the time to actually handwrite them, so I need to kind of type them because it's just faster for me. You can practice with journaling prompts if you're not that good at free writing your journaling stuff, or you can do stream of consciousness writing if you're good at that, or if you want to train yourself in it. There's a thing called morning pages. There's a wonderful YouTuber called Lavendare. She also has a podcast. She has a video on morning pages, and you should really check that out because it opened my mind a couple years back. It's writing around 3 pages, just stream of consciousness. That it can be about anything and everything. It's all about like getting your head emptied onto a piece of paper or, well, your computer screen or wherever. And that stuff changed my mind. Like just trying to do that for like a month every morning. Oof. That will change something in you, I can tell you. If you need journaling prompts that are all around self-love and positivity, I have a freebie on my blog that you can download, that you will get it sent to your inbox, but I will link that in the show notes too. I'm gonna put a freebie in caps above it so you can find it quickly. But yeah, those I made that ages ago. I think I made that's the first second freebie I ever made for my blog, and it's still helpful to like concentrate on the good in the world and in yourself. So if you need journaling prompts, check that out. So that's like roughly what I do. Sometimes I figure out one part of the morning routine, other days I do all of it and more. I mean, I could add other stuff like skincare. I mean, that does stuff to you too. Music also helps. Creativity. I mean, you can do journaling as like a creativity exercise. You can, like, there's so much stuff that you can do in your morning routines that will help your mental health. I mean, you will notice what's good for you, right? Add stuff to that morning routine or even an evening routine that is calming to you. I mean, you know best what's calming to you. That might take a while to completely figure out because, you know, for some people, for example, coloring helps a lot to calm down. I love coloring books, like adult coloring books, child coloring books. I don't care. Coloring's great. But for other people, that is absolutely not calming. You need to figure out like, what's good for you and then incorporate it. And even if you don't incorporate it into a morning routine, you will have this thing as a coping skill when you really feel bad during the time of your life to go back to. For example, again, the coloring. I don't do that in my mornings or in my evenings. I only do that when I really feel anxious without a big reason to be anxious. They're really just figuring out your coping skills that are healthy can do so much to your mental health. It helps you stay sane as a creative so much. But anyway, therapy, in my opinion, is always a good idea for anyone, but especially for people that are creative and have like a more creative thinking brain. Because I already explained it earlier, if you think more emotionally than rationally, I think it's easier to fall into negative patterns. But you know, therapy, even if you think you're healthy and mentally healthy, there's never anything, it's just never a bad decision to do therapy. And I think a lot of people listening to this podcast struggle at least a little bit with mental health and mental illness. So coping mechanisms and healthy habits are all good, but sometimes you need a professional to talk to. And there's nothing bad about that, because a lot of coping mechanisms that happen in your brain are taught in cognitive behavioral therapy, like reframing your thoughts and stuff like that. I know this can be a little bit hard to do in countries like the US, where healthcare is absolutely, you know, I don't want to use a bad word, but you know exactly what I mean. I'm in Europe. I am from Germany. We have universal healthcare here. It's relatively easy to find a therapist and go to one and have regular appointments. I don't know. I mean, for me, it's still hard to find a good one because I have, like, one of my first therapists was so good that I have a higher standard now. But really, it's so essential to find a good therapist. I think even if you have a very mentally healthy state of mind, if you're an entrepreneur or if you're having a creative side hustle, anything, like if your creativity is in any way connected to your income, therapy is also a good idea, because there's also there's always a chance that you connect those two things to each other, like the money and the business and the stress to the creativity, and we don't want that to happen. But you know, I will talk to other people on this podcast, and I will probably ask them about therapy in correlation to having creativity as a job. That's gonna be an interesting thing to ask people. But yeah, socializing is also a big thing that helps with mental health, and you know, socializing is kind of important. Take it from someone that's self-isolated for like 3 years of her life. Socializing is very, 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 very important, and makes all the difference, even if it's just like, even if you're like at home most of the week or all week because you work from home, or anything like that. But like at least once a week you should really meet up with someone, or go to a hobby that you do in a group. Socializing is so essential. Put that into your week somewhere. Even if you're an introvert, even if you thrive alone, I do that too. Like I'm a different person when I'm around people. I mean, I'm still very good at socializing, but I feel yeah. Sometimes I also don't want to do it, but like meeting up with a friend or making friends, super important. That does a lot to your mental health because a lot of mental illness is based in fear, and if you have a social network to fall back on, yeah, you have less things to fear. As you can see, these are all pretty basic things. You probably all heard those before in posts on Instagram about mental health and whatnot. I mean, there's way more things you can do. Of course, there always is. But sticking to like 4 or 5 of these already helps so much to feel better and stabilize yourself and stay on a good course if you're already on a good course. You just want to feel like a good difference, right? In conclusion, meditate, exercise, read, journal, and socialize. And, therapy if that's something you need. I don't have a fun acronym for this. That would be great. The Miracle Morning book has the acronym SAVERS for like the 6 habits it has in the book. You should really read the book. I can make an entire different podcast around the book too if you want me to do that, but I would need to reread that first. I'll have an entire blog post up for this episode that I will also link in the show notes, and I hope that will help a little bit more if I rambled a little bit too much for you. I mean, it's a podcast, but sometimes I talk a little bit in circles. That's kind of what I am and who I am as a person. And if you want to learn more about self-care habits overall, like all kind of self-care habits, you can go to rayuag.com/self-care ebook. That's also linked in the show notes. That's an ebook that I wrote a while ago all about self-care habits, combining self-care habits, everything self-care. For anyone that's like a beginner in this topic or like intermediate, yeah, you might want to read that ebook. It's pretty affordable too. Just check it out. I have it linked. Until next time, make sure you follow this podcast on whichever platform you're on. Give it a 5-star review on the platforms that you can review on. And let me know if your reading habits also changed since the rise of social media, because I feel like I read way less since social media is a thing, and I really want to change that. Also, I'm thinking about making Q&A rounds in the future for people that rated the podcast and DM me proof of it. Would you be interested in that? Let me know about that too, either on my socials or on the podcast social media, which is right now just the Twitter. Just let me know if you want to do Q&A stuff, because I would be very, very interested in answering personal questions on here every few episodes, maybe every like 10 episodes having a Q&A round. That would be kind of neat. Let me know if you'd be into that. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of the people around you. Bye!